Hello and welcome. I'm April and I'm the founder of the Love and Loss Project, and I help women through love and loss and relationship challenges. And I am really excited because I have Emma Franklin Bell here, and Emma is a visibility expert. She helps women to get their messages seen and have their work reach more people. And I knew that this work really mattered to a lot of my circle as well, because I know that a lot of people are really feeling drawn to write books, to share their blogs, to be coaching and supporting other women in the world, and can just use this boost of support for really how to get themselves out there. And I thought you were really the best person for them to speak to about that. So thank you so much, Emma, for being here with me.
Oh, thanks, April. It's a real delight to talk to you here about this. And yeah, couldn't agree more that this is something that women need to embrace more and think about more as they're going forward with their blogs, businesses, practices, therapy. So really, really important. So really looking forward to the conversation.
So I'm curious if you can just kind of share with us a little bit more about what it is that you help women with and what makes this so important to you. How did you become interested in that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I come actually from a performing arts background. So I come from a very creative background as a dancer and dance teacher and choreographer and that whole area. And I still do a bit of work in that area. But I got very interested in visibility and women needing to get out there when I wrote my own book. And then I had women who asked me about how I did that and then how I could, give them advice on how to do that. Because in the dance industry, I wrote a book about running studios. And what it did was it positioned me as an expert. It gave me authority in that. And so then I saw the real value in sharing your message, your ideas, your expertise, your experience. And then whether it's through doing video like this or having a podcast or writing a book, just the value on doing that and how then it lands with people in your community, and then how you can really grow and develop in your business. And it really takes you to a bit of a different space rather than just doing the day to day. It really opens up things for you. And why it's important is, I love that question because it made me think about, why do I think this is, why is this really important? And I think that for women, it is really important right now because visibility is about the person, it's about the person coming forward, and not hiding behind logos or companies or businesses, but enabling you as the individual to step forward. And I think that's really important because I think that as we move on as a community and a society, we do want to connect with people. We want to connect with story. We want to relate. And I mean, April, you do relationship work. And I mean, I'd imagine that, a lot of your work is about connection, communication, understanding people. And so I think that's why it's so important and exciting and fun to be really thinking about using yourself and becoming more visible to share your story and share messages.
And I really could not agree more, because I feel like it's not just useful. I feel like it's actually essential. I feel like it truly is a critical step that a lot of us really want to bypass and kind of just hang out in the background a little bit. I certainly know that was the case for me. So I had my private practice for about 10 years. But when I really realized that I needed to be getting some of my work out there, that more people really needed to hear some of the stuff I had to say after I had lost my daughter, I saw these needs in the community that were not, that there were gaps. So I remember at that time being like, I just want to be able to kind of hit post on this. without
Yeah.
being seen, but I knew that that would be a disservice to the work, and that I realized people had to see who they were talking to. And so I definitely know how uncomfortable and intimidating and scary it can be to really hit that live button, or to really put your own photo out there, and to really step into owning your work and your voice in that different way. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on really what gets in the way and what kind of holds women back from doing that, from being seen?
Well, I think it is everything that you've said there. I mean, especially if you've had a tragedy, like many people have, and no doubt you did when you experienced that. Um, so I think if the story that you're wanting to share is quite raw, that can be very difficult. And I think that you take the the time, and you you give
Totally.
yourself space, you give yourself time, you work through that, and then when you feel ready, then you step forward. I think the things that do hold women back are quite a couple of things, actually. I think fear, obviously, and this is thrown around all the time, that we're all talking about fear and the sort of biological response to survival and protection of self, etc. And that is a real true thing, stepping out from the crowd and being in the front, being a leader of some sort in a small community or medium, whatever size. The stepping out in front does give us those fear, anxiety feelings. And I think with that, it's about the awareness. I always say to clients that if you can frame up things, and you can sort of preempt what's going to happen or how you're going to feel, you're less sort of in the dark about it. And when it turns up for you, you go, oh, that's what's happening now. So we can preempt and know that fear will come up. So if you're going to go live, if you're going to put your book out there, if you're going to even press submit on a newsletter to a new community that you're building, that'll come up. And so if you know that it's going to come up, you can just say, oh, there it is. Yep, I'm feeling that feeling, not feeling great, feeling a bit of anxiety, but I knew that was coming, and now I'm going to step through it and still do it in the face of fear. So yes, so having those frame ups and sort of preemptive ideas as to what is going to come up is really good. Um, the other thing that comes up, and again has been spoken about quite a bit, is that women as a collective group haven't been all out there like the men have for generations, leading the world, leading companies. If you look at the Fortune 500, it's still male dominated. So even as young girls, seeing leaders and figures who are in sort of prominent positions, we were often seeing men. So for women to say, yeah, I'm going to have a piece of that, and I'm going to step forward and be part of that, and make an impact and lead something and say something and step forward, just as a group, we're just not as used to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore we need to just, again, be aware of it. Not really used to that. The sisters, we haven't done a whole heap. So that's why it's time for us to do it. And if you feel called to do it, then you do it.
I
Yeah.
think that's so true, because you're right. In many ways, it's unfamiliar territory, both on a wider scale and on a really personal, individual scale. And I think with that, comes some of the things I've heard from other women is this idea of, and I can relate to this, right? This idea of I'm going to be misunderstood. People are going to think I'm just attention seeking. People are going to think, oh, she thinks she's so great, right? And so it's this funny thing of, I love your point that in some ways, if we wait until we're no longer afraid to do it, we're never going to do it, because that fear is just a part of the process. And I think that's so brilliant, because I think a lot of women really think, once I get over my fear, then I'll do it. And you're really saying the fear is coming along with you. Make room for the fear.
Yes, and it's like you've probably read Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. A lot of, people in your community and my community love that book and have read it. And Liz says that in one of the chapters, and she talks about, fear is going to be there. I think it's fear. Yeah, she's talking about fear, and that it can just take a back seat. It's in the car riding along, but she can just take a back seat.
Because it is
Yeah.
an built-in part of that process. It just is. And I like your point as well about really framing that all the way through, because, for me, and I think what that sometimes looked like was being like, what am I really afraid of here? And then sometimes it would come down to like the silliest thing, but old friends from high school are going to make fun of me. And you're like, yep, old friends from high school are probably going to make fun of you. And so what? Are you really going to not go and take care of this really important need that exists, where people need to hear what you have to say because so-and-so from high school is going to make fun of you behind your back, right? Like, or say unflattering things.
And that's why I think it's so good to call it and own it, like you're saying. So yes, you could do a list, if you're quite a practical person, you could think, well, what are all the things that, could happen here? Yes, the ex-husband or the friends from high school. Do this full list, and then you're like, yep, okay, so that's probably going to happen, and then you march on through, because I think the thing is, if we let that list of people or things hold us back, and we don't do these projects, you will get to the later years, etc., and you will have resentment and frustration because you didn't create those things in the world. Your creative ideas and work and stepping forward to do these things are there for a reason, and I think that it's the hero's journey. I talk about the hero's journey quite a bit. And it's like, if you get the call that, I'd love to write a book, or I'd love to leave corporate and step into my own practice, or I'd love to start, giving my words of wisdom every week, and you feel that. I mean, why is that rising in you? I mean, there is something there. And it's interesting because a lot of the women I work with are 50 plus, 45, 50 plus. And they've often got to that point where they have left the husband or the job or what have you. And they say, I just didn't feel that I could do this at 30, and now I'm sort of 50 and I'm like, well, I'm doing it, and they sort of, they want to do it. So that's what I would say to you, if there's something burning inside you, to really consider, taking those first steps to move to doing it. Yes.
And I think that's so important. I just really want to highlight what you just said there, that if you are feeling that urge, if you do kind of have those images and those pictures come up in your mind of what this could look like or what you want to offer, you need to honor that. That is there for a reason. That is your truth. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, why it's there, you can get mystical about that, but it's there.
It's there.
It's there.
Mm-hmm.
So it needs to be looked at.
So I have a couple questions that have come in, and I just was hoping to get your thoughts on this, because there's a couple good ones that I picked out here, which is one of them. Is it okay if we dive into that?
Oh, yes. Dive in.
Lovely. So one of the questions was, if you were just getting started, or if you have a smaller business or a smaller platform, how do you approach those people that you want to collaborate with that maybe have a much bigger following or a much bigger established business for themselves?
Yeah, and this is a really great question, and this used to come up when I had a podcast, and I would interview people that were quite well known on that podcast, and people would say, I have a smaller podcast, how can I get these bigger names on there so that I can get more reach and exposure? And one of the things that you need to do is actually think about the value that you can give to that, that bigger platform or that bigger person. So in terms of a collaboration, it needs to come from a value-driven standpoint for them, that is a really good way of doing it. So, for example, in my notes here, no, that's about the other question. So if you can think about, okay, well, what is it here that I could do, how I could add value to this person? You know, could I have them on my podcast? Could I interview them? Could I expose them to my list, who is small but say very specific and niched?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can get really creative. You know, if I'm writing a book, could I do a case study or a chapter about them? Or, you know, offer them the opportunity to do the foreword? Could I, if I had an event, could I invite them, you know, as a speaker, or offer them some sort of partnership for free or something? So in those early days, you will have to do quite a bit that's free, that's unpaid. You know, you're sort of earning your stripes, and you want to be able to really offer value. So you never go in sort of talking about yourself or your business. You really are talking about how your community would really value what they have to offer, and then so therefore what it is that you can give to them to help them. So the value exchange, that kind of win-win, has to be really compelling. And then in practical terms, something that you can do is actually see if there's a contact that you know who sort of stands between you and them. So, for example, I wanted to interview this woman in Australia who's really well known. She's called Mia Friedman. She has her own massive podcast, you know, lots of podcasts. She has a massive platform called Mamma Mia. She's got a book, all the rest of it. She's quite a big name. And I thought, oh, you know, how am I going to get her on the show? I would love to have her on. And I found someone who I knew who was an in-between contact, you know, someone who I just sat there and thought, who are all the people I know? And I had a look at my Facebook and everything. And this woman knew Mia, and she also knew me. And I was able to ask her if she could put me in contact with someone who was the publicist, basically, for Mia. And if the other person, this is the other point, if the other business has something happening, that's a very good PR moment. So if someone else is bringing out a book, or they have an event or something like that, and it's very timely right now, you can jump on that. And that is really helpful for them as well, because they're wanting to get their book out. They're wanting to, you know, if they're doing a tour of the book, etc. So yeah, you look for things that are timely. You look for contacts who sit between you and them, so you can get a little bit more in the door. And you definitely offer this this value. You've just got to find that value somewhere, and it might be, you just got to get really creative about where that value is that you can offer them.
I think that's really, really smart, because I think that's something that a lot of us really struggle with. And even just that process is such a learning curve. And what I think about, one of the things I think about when you say that is, there's times when people will approach me and say, hey, I wrote this book. Can you share this book? And on one hand, I would love to support them more. But at the same time, what you're really asking me to do is spend 6 hours of my week really investing in your stuff. I have to read your book, see if it's really something I want to support and want to share with my audience and can wholeheartedly endorse. And then I have to promote it. And so in some ways, I really love that shift of saying, what can I bring to that person? What can I
Yes.
really offer them, instead of what can they do for me? Because then we're really talking about relationship, right? As opposed to a singular kind of transaction.
Yes, again, you're getting that connection, and yeah, same. I mean, if you're a podcaster, you get requests all the time, and I'm starting another one next year, but I had 2 shows, and I would just get requests all the time. And the people who came through, who were able to say to me, you know, sort of all these things to do with, I'll share the show, and I think, and also, I think my community would really benefit from this type of show. So I knew that they'd listened to the show, so those people really, really made me take notice, because the ones that just came through where it looked like they had just gone to all the podcasters and said, here I am, Jenny, and, I do this, da, 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 and I'm great, No, it just didn't, it wasn't compelling. It didn't build relationship. It just didn't. So these days, that's what you want to be doing: relationship, connection, value.
That's neat. That's neat. Another question that came in was, when you were starting to put your work out there and starting to put your story out there in a way, how do you know when you are oversharing? How do you know when it's getting to be too much personal stuff that you're putting out there?
Yeah, and I took some notes on this one because I've been asked this one a few times as well. So I wanted to just make sure that I was, clear, because with visibility and personal branding, it can, you can be told that, you've just got to put yourself out there. You've got to share, your stories, and you've got to be really real, and you've got to, do all of this. And people can get quite intimidated with this. And so these points that I've got here are, what you want to know is, you want to know initially how much of your personal information you feel comfortable with sharing. Because some people are, they're sort of oversharers almost, they're really, really interested in sharing everything. They often come from the personal blogger, and they come from that kind of industry, the personal blogging industry, and they are used to it. They're used to sort of airing everything. They ask their family, is it okay that I talk about you? And they just absolutely go for it, and they feel comfortable doing that. If you're not that type of person, you need to gauge first, before you do any of this practice, any of this work, what you actually do feel comfortable. Where's your level? Do you feel comfortable showing pictures of your children and the house and the dog? Or do you feel like you want to be a little bit more reserved? And people who often who are, say, less experienced with the online world, or they come from corporate, or they come from business and less of the personal blogging, they are more reserved. They do feel less comfortable being too exposed. So, and that is really okay. And what have I said? If you haven't worked out where you feel in terms of your gauge of what you feel comfortable with, you want to actually just sit down and work out where you feel comfortable. And what will happen is that if you do overshare and you think to yourself, oh, this will probably happen. You'll probably get a gut feeling that something doesn't feel right. So you might think, okay, I'm going to stretch myself out of my comfort zone, and I'm going to share all this, stuff about a recent story, and you share it, and then you do feel uncomfortable, different to just feeling a bit nervous, because it's the fear of visibility, but more actually uncomfortable that you've said too much, that you've pushed it a bit. And it kind of be internal, like a gut feeling. You actually won't feel right. So you have to be quite internalized with that. The other thing that might happen is, if you have a coach or mentor, they might alert you to the fact that it was a TMI, or too much information. And and they might therefore say, it's not really you to share that much. How are you feeling? And they might walk you through that, and you will then be able to gauge. It's all about your own gauging, your own monitoring, and your own boundary setting. Boundary setting is really critical. And the other thing too is that you might get some engagement that actually is a bit off. And by engagement, I mean comments or private DMs or emails or something that are a bit could be it could be any number of things, but it's just maybe the way people have responded to it. And you think, oh, that's a bit, it's not really great, because the thing, and this is sort of, is quite a tricky one, because every individual who has a business, who's getting out there, who's doing visibility work, has a position. In marketing terms, you call it positioning, and it's where you're positioned. Are you, and that's a whole branding thing. It's a branding thing. It's kind of a, what level you're kind of positioning at, in terms of prices and everything. There's a whole range of stuff that goes into this, and your visibility and your oversharing quota or whatever does come down to positioning as well. And that's why you do have to do quite a bit of work on knowing what your positioning is, and then also knowing that if you put something out there, is that actually congruent? Is it actually a match with the way that you have decided to position yourself? So with me, for example, I don't come from the personal blogging space. I come from business. Yes, I come from performance, which is quite out there, but I don't, but in terms of personal, stuff, it's fairly, there is personal stories, but they are fairly contained. They're fairly managed, and that's I've chosen to do that because I also like a distinct separation between personal life and my business work. Some people don't. I have colleagues who don't. They actually like everything to blend, and their personal life's everywhere and their business is all mishmashed all together. I don't like that. I'm a bit more, I like to do this, and then I like to do this. So
and I
yeah,
think
it's a real.
Oh, sorry. I think that's really neat for people to hear as well, because I think sometimes right now there's this idea of vulnerability as a really trendy kind of thing. And while I completely get that in terms of really our own individual work and our own ability to really step into those vulnerable pieces of our own life, I don't know that's always stuff that we always want to hit send on. And so, to me, I love really what you're highlighting about that intentional thing. And you are allowed to have some degrees of separation, and you're allowed to set your own rules. And it really comes down to that question of, why am I sharing this? That really pause of, why am I sharing this?
Yes. And and it is very confusing with the authenticity in the conversation and the vulnerability in the conversation. People can think, therefore, that they need to be very exposed. But I think that the vulnerability and the authenticity is more about how you show up as a person.
Totally.
How, whatever you're talking about, how you connect. And that, yes, you don't have to feel the pressure, because any pressure where you sort of feel that you have to share things that you don't feel comfortable with, well, that's a slippery slope. So I've always been very strong on boundaries, because I'm also very strong on energy management. And when you start getting, if it feels uncomfortable and you sort of push to do the oversharing, you actually strain your energy. You're actually sort of leaking you're not holding that boundary. You're actually leaking that energy out there, and it doesn't feel quite right, but you've thought you need to do it. And so you can find yourself in a bit of a situation where you then have to pull back. So you want to be really, it's really about a feeling. It's really about a feeling.
And oh, sorry, I was just going to say, as you describe that, it almost makes me think of like dating, right? That like really you just kind of start to take small steps and see what feels comfortable and test it as you go, as opposed to the big leap. You're not throwing out the engagement rings on your second date.
Oh, that's right. And I love that, because it is those incremental small steps, even with any of this visibility stuff, whether it's videos, podcasts, getting yourself out there. if you are sort of starting from the beginning, it's the experimenting with things, and it's the small steps. You would never, think to yourself that you have to do all of these things and be really great and do all of them all at once. You just take one
Mm-hmm.
step and you do that for a little while, and then you do the next and the next. I'm a big believer of the next and the next and the next, building upon.
Makes
But yet someone else might just say, throw you in the deep end or something. So it's all about your personality. But I like the steps. And
I'm with
they
you.
get,
Hmm.
yeah,
And in this
yeah,
day and age, once it's out there forever, right? So really like step
yes,
gently and slowly. See what
yeah,
really is your truth and your thing, not just what this person does or this person does or that person does, but
yeah.
really what is your truth, what's comfortable for you. Neat.
Yeah, and have a bit of a read too. There's quite a lot of articles and stuff around, sharing your family and children and that, so you can also have a read, because there's a whole, area of privacy and sort of overexposure of children and that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
So you also want to be aware of that. No, just have a think about it. How do you feel about it?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep, that check-in. Neat.
Mm.
So what would be, as we kind of just wrap up here, what would be one top kind of one piece of advice that you would offer to anyone that's listening right now that's really looking at how to put themselves out there a little bit more or maybe be a little bit braver? What would you
Mm.
offer them?
I would say that have a bit of a feel into what feels really natural to you. So, and this can be the way that you communicate. And I've done quite a bit of work on helping people identify their different styles, different ways that people communicate. And I've got a quiz actually that helps people work out what kind of connecting type person they are. So because that's the other thing with online, you can see people being really dynamic and really out there, and you think, oh, do I have to do that? Or then you might watch someone else and they're really philosophical and they've got all this information, and you think, oh wow, they're so intelligent, is that me? I don't know. So getting into the way that you actually need to show up with your
Yeah,
voice
cool.
is really, really critical, because that's not something that you just follow what someone else is doing. That's you. So I'd work out that. And then I'd also work out, when it comes to channels, because that's what we do with visibility, we also then look at the channels, that you've got, podcasting and video. I'd sit there and think, okay, well, what feels most me? What feels most comfortable to me?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're always looking at the present situation. In a year's time, when you've done a lot, you might say, well, what feels really good now is this. So you just look at now and you say, what feels really good? Is it having a bit of a go at blogging? Because people still read blogs, and you can repurpose blogs everywhere on all your social stuff. So if it's the written word, really lean into that. Do it consistently, do it a lot, get your voice going. If it's another type of channel, it might even be offline, it might be public speaking. Whatever it is, get to grips with what it is, and just focus on that. I think just focus on that for maybe the next 3 months, 6 months, and get really good, get really into your groove on that.
Really.
Um, that would be my piece of advice. Do not look at all of the stuff and think, you'll just exhaust yourself. You'll end up on a lounge exhausted. So
Mm-hmm.
you just look and pick. Yeah,
Right.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to get on some podcasts, and I'm going to, whatever it is. That would be my advice. Lean into that.
I love that, because I think that there's so much pressure to kind of be everywhere and be doing everything. And I think that sometimes where you see people quit, they start these beautiful things, these beautiful projects, and then they get exhausted and say, oh, I'm not really getting traction and I'm just going to stop. Whereas really for you to say, pick the one thing that kind of lights you up and just
Yes.
commit to 3 months of doing that one thing. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of when you talk about traction, I mean, that's sort of moving into a different part of business, and that is, always making sure whatever you pick, that you're always talking about what's on offer, so that people do actually know what you do. Because another key piece of visibility is actually repeating what you do or what you stand for, whatever it is, again and again and again. So people actually, they could just look at your Instagram feed, or they could look at your website at a few of the blog titles, or listen to one podcast, and they think, okay, that woman, she's on about this. That's what she stands for. That's really interesting. So, and that can change, but that is really something else that you really want to think about from a business point of view, and that then you're always leading people to, if you're talking about traction, always leading people to something that they can do, whether it's buy your book or opt in or something. So, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes, but slightly different topic, but yes, always think about that. Where you're leading people next, what's the next offer?
Well, and I noticed too, one of the things that you have coming up shortly is really you're helping people to write a book. Can you tell me a little bit about that? You're doing a 5-day book challenge. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah, it's a 5-day free workshop. So it's because it's quite overwhelming to think, oh dear, I've got to write a book in 5 days. So it's not. It's a 5-day workshop where we talk about different parts of your book. We get your book title, your book subtitle. You get, you'll get creative and do your cover, because that spurs you on. I also tell you the whole layout, what you can do with your whole layout of your book, and how you can get a template and lay all that out. And we'll kick off you writing your introduction, so you get some written stuff. There's also, I talk about, the 7 strategies that authors need to be focusing on, to be successful. And also, how can you make money from a book? If you write one, are you going to think, oh no, is that going to sit on the shelf and get dusty? Is it a good business move for me to do a book, and how can I make money? So there's these fun workshops happening over the 5 days in my Facebook group, Connected Women Community. So if you head over to that Facebook group, Connected Women Community, it's happening there 28th of August. So it's going to be really exciting, because a book, I love books because they get your thought leadership and your ideas and what you think and what you stand for into this, easy to sort of understand book with each chapter, and people can just really get what you stand for. And the other good thing is that when you write the book, you get even clearer on what you stand for. It's very interesting. It's like a cathartic practice for you to do it, as much as it is to get it out there and get it done. So so that's really exciting, and it's coming up. And so anyone who's interested at all in writing non-fiction books, then you'll probably like it and get something out of it.
Very cool. Well, thank you so, so much for really all of your expertise. There's been so many really very cool takeaways that I've gotten out of this. And so I know that women are so going to benefit from your time. And I so appreciate that, Emma.
Oh, wonderful, April. Yes, thank you again for getting in touch. And I just hope that the women or anyone listening finds it really valuable and gets a few bits of wisdom from it.
Nice. And where can people stay connected to you again?
So if you're interested in that connector quiz, as to what style you are you an inspirer or, an advocate, etc. That quiz happens at my website, emmafranklinbell.com/quiz. And it'll tell you what you are.
Cool.
You can
I want to take that.
Yes, it's fun. It's fun. And then, on Instagram and Facebook and around, Emma Franklin Bell, talking about, visibility, books, getting out there. So, love to connect.
Thank you. And thank you so much for watching, all of you. If you have questions that come up for you after you see this, feel free just to send us messages. I'm at Love April or lovelastproject.com. And Emma is at Emma Franklin Bell. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.